All right. So the election post-colonial state is focused on socio-economic development in Papua New Guinea. So that era, the importance of that discussion is that I want you to understand the kind of development plans that the Somare government, the early Somare government, tried to put in place. Okay, they wanted a development plan, but at the same time, the challenges that they faced are structural challenges, and these challenges are as a result of the colonial legacy. All right, so the challenges comes in the form of both the economical and political impacts. Political, an example of it is the paternalistic policy. Economical challenge is the import-dependent economy that it created. So in the first two lectures, the first lectures we talked about lack of exports as a result of the primitive accumulation and center-periphery ideas. So that created an import-dependent economy, and that our economy, this import-dependent economy created a structural barrier, all right? And those structural barriers poses development challenges after independence. Despite the government's or Somali government's plans to initiate or establish development plans and development goals, their development plans and goals were very much met with those structural challenges, and they had to forego some of these development plans or objectives. So that is the purpose of this lecture, and please have a look at that reading. Okay, it will give you in detail examples and also as rich knowledge about what was happening. So, first of all, I looked at the timeline of events in the lecture, and so basically the lecture is broken down into the transition period and the 8-point plan, okay, the development phase or development planning phase. Okay, so the transition period and the development planning phase. Now the transition period phase, and I won't go through the timeline because I did that in the lecture and I recorded the lecture video, so I'll post it up later. I would like us to go to slide 5. So like any countries around the world, developing countries, okay, in Africa, prior to or transition period into self-government independence was met with bloodsheds, sometimes struggles, political turmoil, conflicts, indifferences. So what I'm trying to say is that Papua New Guinea during those times was not different from other developing countries. But thankfully, that the transition period did not see a great instability affecting self-government efforts. However, we have Bougainville, but before talking about Bougainville, the transition period saw the rise of what is called the pressure and nationalist group, or nationalist pressure group rather. Now, the features of these nationalist pressure groups is that they were significant but they were small. Okay, important, significant, but they were small. Why? They were significant because they were arguing, advocating for genuine concern. So that made it significant. But they were small in group, in size. So why is that important also? They had no potential for political mobilization. So political mobilization will reach national mobilization, and when it becomes a national issue, then it becomes a threat towards a self-government or the state, a threat towards the colonial state. So although they were significant significant nationalist pressure groups, they were small. And another, in addition to that, was that their interest and what they were advocating for were diverse. All right? There was no unity in what they were advocating for. There was no one argument that they were advocating for. So their interests were diverse. So within that framework here, let's look at the nationalist pressure groups involved. Now, first is the Matahungan Association of the 1960s to the 1970s, or 1972. I said they had diverse interests, and one of their interests was that they demanded to take over the expatriate plantations. Okay, if they demand to take over expatriate plantation, okay, you would notably know that they were fighting for equal opportunity in the plantation business, or fighting for equal opportunity in terms of the economic and social benefits that comes with the plantation system. So you can say it was an economic. They were fighting for economic opportunity over the white settlers. Now, diverse or small, meaning that fight alone, okay, was in East New Britain, and that fight did not mobilize the people in the islands or the southern region. Okay, so that meant that it did not rise up to be a national issue. It was significant, economic opportunity was significant, or it's a significant issue, but that issue was isolated, that issue were concerned around the people of East New Britain, especially the people of Gazelle. So it was not a wider concern. Secondly, the island's opposition. What was their demands? They demanded for delay of self-government. All right? They demanded for delay of self-government. So delay of self-government and equal opportunity are two different expressions, or are two different arguments, yeah? Or interests, rather. Why was that? Because they were suspicious of the coastal leaders, especially Pangu Party. They were saying that Pangu Party and the coastal leaders were too radical, and if they get independence too quickly, they might affect it might affect the island's region in terms of the business opportunities. And lastly is Papua Besena movement. So Papua Besena movement, they opposed Papua and New Guinea, or opposed forced unity with New Guinea. So this was led by Josephine Abijah. They didn't want to be part of the Papua New Guinea Act. They wanted to be part of Australia. That is a genuine concern, a significant concern. But again, that concern only resonated with the people in the Papuan region and not people outside of Papua. So that is why the nationalist pressure group was significant but small and did not pose any threat to destabilize the effort of self-government. Okay? They were significant, but they were small. Their interests were diverse, and they did not have any stronghold or political mobilization to cause instability on the state. And then comes Bougainville. Now, Bougainville is a special issue because now we have a much regional threat that can destabilize the effort of state and nation building. So the idea of the Sumare government was geared towards state and nation building. State building is getting all the political structures or the apparatus coming into place so that by self-government, the government would have necessary political infrastructures to carry forward. Nation building talks about uniting people. And this is where, through nation building, now it becomes a threat. So the Sumare government were not, the Sumare government were very much fearful of the nation building aspect leading towards self-government, not the state building aspect. The state building talks about laws, institutions, structures. They were all created already. But how do you get the people coming together to have a trust in this notion of state building? So you have to work towards a nation building. This is where Bougainville comes in. Now, Bougainville itself had its experience with European exploitation. Before the Bougainville copper mine, Bougainville people had an experience with people coming in looking for materials, copper, minerals. Now, when Bougainville copper came in, there were intense conflict over land rights, pollution, and most importantly is the royalty benefits. We've discussed in our neoclassical phase lecture number 2, that by 1960s, the Australian government or colonial administration was pulling away significant funding. So that also affected our country's ability to generate money or revenues internally, domestically. So our economy now was depending more on foreign help, foreign assistance. And that is where foreign aid comes in. And foreign assistance will come in the form of multinational corporation or multinational companies. Because our government were busy developing the necessary political infrastructure for state building, they did not yet have time to develop an economical infrastructure for economic development. That is why multinational companies become enticing or become important, significant during this period. Because multinational company brings in wealth of, or brings with it huge amount of money that our government needs to fund basic services. And also they bring in knowledge, so knowledge and capital and labor, all right? So during that important phase, that made it in such a way that the people's right or royalty benefits, so to speak, the people had no say in whatsoever in terms of negotiating with the Bougainville copper mine or the multinational company. Now those issues contributed towards the people of Bougainville, their vision or contribute towards their sentiments towards the state or Papua New Guinea state. So by 1975, they demanded for a separate independence, September 1st, 1975. Remember that, I might put that in the quiz, so dates are important as well. Okay, in the quiz, it was not 1966 food report, it was the 1962 food report. So if you put a statement true, then you are wrong. So it's 1962 food report. So the correct answer is false. Why dates are important is that, okay, date will tell you the significance of that very event. The significance will tell you the importance of those discussions. All right? So here, so by September 1st, 1975, the Papua New Guinea, September 15th, Papua New Guinea got its independence. September 1st, Bougainville called for a separate state. Now, why this is important? Like I said, in the National Pressure Group, they were diverse interests. Their interest was diverse, and they, although significant, diverse and small. But the regional threat from Bougainville, it's not diverse anymore. It's talking about secessionist or secession, separation, independence. Independence now, it's a call for a national consent. That is why going forward in Papua New Guinea politics, and this is an example of it, the very issues that will cause instability and fragmentation in our country will come through regional politics or regional differences. All right? So, not so much of national pressure groups. They can, I mean, we can have a national pressure groups here, but the challenges is that these national pressure groups will be small, although significant, but very small. But when it comes to regional groups, Papua New Guinea's instability going forward will be defined by regional politics. And coming back to this, we are here in 2025. Governments, regional politics comes in the form of autonomy. So instability will come from regional threat. So political autonomy in current discussion is an example of those regional challenges that will have an impact on the state. All right, let's look at the socio-economic or development policy, the 8-point plan. So here in the reading you will go through various examples, but this is a summary of the 8-point plan. Now I would like to say that the 8-point plan is the very first Vision 2050, MTDS, MTDP, all those government plans, the very first template of those government plans. Because if you look at the 8-point plan, what the Somare government was advocating in those 8-point plan is still being advocated, or it's still being talked about and put into those various plans today. And most of our plans today always talks about addressing socio-economical challenges, number one. And secondly, and more importantly, is that most of these development plans, Vision 2050, MTDP, or whatever plan that it may be, will always talk about self-reliance, whether it be fiscal self-reliance, political self-reliance, or social self-reliance. Now, having an idea of the 8-point plan will help you read well the discussions that is focusing on those MTDPs of Vision 2050. Now, first is the 8-point plan wants to address self-reliance. Very genuine. Again, here, the challenge to achieving self-reliance will come in the form of the structural barriers and the political discourse, or the legacy of those political discourse. Now, Sumara's government aim was to reduce economical and political dependence. Now, when you talk about reducing political dependence, that would be achievable. Okay, we might not need other countries to come and tell us how to run our country politically. However, we will need other countries to come and help us, assist us economically. So if you want to talk about self-reliance, and Sumara government found out about that. When Sumara government talks about wanted self-reliant in the 8-point plan, it realized that the economy that is import dependent cannot sustain on its own. It needs foreign direct investment. I'll give you an example. Why do the government always talk about the foreign reserve? Does anyone know the reason behind why the government always talking about foreign reserve? Shortage of foreign reserve in parliament and everywhere in the social media? Does anyone has any idea? Okay, so now we've established that Papua New Guinea is an import-dependent economy. When in an import-dependent economy, we get all our basic things not produced in our country, but coming from other countries. So that means we import all our items from our other countries. You think you go to the second-hand, they don't produce second-hand locally. They import second-hand bales from Australia, New Zealand, and other countries. All right? So your demand for cheap second-hand clothes ensure that they need to import more second-hand clothes to PNG or Papua New Guinea. Now, why does that affect self-reliance or let me answer the foreign exchange. When you go to buy imports, you don't buy imports using Papua New Guinea. You buy imports using the US dollar. When you buy imports using the US dollar, that means that you must have in your savings, in the reserve, a large amount of foreign exchange. So foreign exchange enables imports. Decrease in foreign exchange means that there will be less quick eye in the shops, and then chicken runs out. So when talking about self-reliance, the Somali government found out that self-reliance in their 8-point plan is not achievable because the economy, import-dependent economy, still depends on imports coming from outside. Now, how do you replenish your foreign reserve? When a company comes in to your country, the company needs to do business in the country. So what they do is that they come in and they buy Papua New Guinea kina. So when you sell Papua New Guinea kina to those companies coming in, then you are filling up the foreign reserves. All right? They are bringing in foreign currency. They are bringing in foreign exchange. That is where multinational companies are important, because when they come in with big foreign currencies. So, number one is that the Somali government found out that it depends now on those foreign currencies, and it needs to attract foreign investments. So, self-reliance is not achievable if you have an import-dependent economy. And number two is that Papua New Guinea relies heavily on foreign aid. All right? Okay? So that affected the self-reliance argument in the 8-point plan. And of course, Vision 2050 and other development plans later, when they talk about self-reliant, we have to be very careful which sort of self-reliance are we talking about. Is it economical self-reliance or political self-reliance in the autonomy? Okay, so That was what Somalia government found out, that self-reliance was not achievable because of external economic dependence and also the budget dependence through foreign aid and Australian aid. Okay, secondly, rural development. Okay, I have 5 minutes, so let me try and speed up this. So rural development. When you have an import-dependent economy, and it creates an enclave situation where most of the economy, services, activity is only focused at the urban areas. So when that happens, when you have focus of economic activity in the urban areas, then the only logical way is to spend more government expenditure in the urban centers and not the rural areas. Why would you go and build a road in Teleforming when there is no business activity in Teleforming? You set up a factory in Teleforming, and how do you intend to bring your supplies to the nearest urban center? So if you look at that logic, then it's not viable to focus in or concentrate more on rural development because the necessary infrastructures, economic infrastructures was not laid down. So it's a structural issue when Somalia government found out about it. So meaning that more money will not go to rural development. They will rural areas for rural development. It will come to urban areas. Why? Because center of economic activity is in the urban areas. All right. So the challenge now is how do we bring economic development to the rural areas? Well, the members of parliament have come up with an idea. Okay. They said that we can bring development to the rural areas by implementing the SIP and PSIP. Okay, but that's a challenge that the 8-point plan has found out. Second is regional equalization. Again, here, the same principle here. When it comes to region, those that were regions that have urban centers tend to develop. Mosby city is more developed than other regions. So let's say NCD. So there is a regional inequality in terms of regional development. So that was what the Somalia government found out. That affected the 8-point plan. Decentralization again. The 1976 Organic Law on Decentralization talks about empowering the people. When the 1995 decentralization came on board, it strips away the effort on empowerment and moved it to a more focus on supply and demand, supply of decentralization. Although the 8-point plan opted for a decentralization to be more focused on empowerment, but again you have no focus on regional development, a very big regional inequality, then that affects decentralization efforts. And then finally, economic opportunities for nationals. By that time, the Somalia government found out that there was not so much indigenous business enterprise, participation of our people in business sectors. And that is one of the reasons why we saw an influx of Chinese coming in and do businesses in Papua New Guinea, because our people did not, the number of our people doing business there is not significant. So the government started to build up agricultural bank, national development bank, so that our people can get loan and do business. That very same template during the 8-point plan was carried out by the Marape government through the SME. So that idea, so the 8-point plan there is important because it helps us understand the effort that our government wants to bring, okay, although they are genuine efforts, but those efforts are met with structural barriers and challenges. And understanding those challenges is important for us, students of politics, okay, to understand, okay, going forward, various harder development plans that the government wish to bring in. All right, so that concludes the tutorial discussion for Unit 4.